Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the soft golden haze of a Byzantine beekeeper's day. A life so rhythmically uneventful, so gently repetitive, that you might just drift off before we even get to the part where the emperor taxes your honey. Picture this: it's still dark in 6th century Constantinople, and you're curled up on a thin straw mattress wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket. The air smells of wood smoke, and the faintest hint of honey from yesterday's harvest clinging to your fingertips. Outside, the city is silent, except for the distant clang of a monastery bell, and of course, the ever-present hum of your bees. You groan, rolling onto your side. No alarm clocks here, just the insistent buzz of insects who've decided sunrise is now thank you very much. As you shuffle barefoot across the packed earth floor, you stub your toe on a clay hive tool historically accurate and historically painful. By the time you've mumbled a curse in Greek, the first sliver of dawn is already painting the Bosphorus pink. Here's the thing about Byzantine beekeeping: it's shockingly peaceful compared to, say, being a soldier or a tax collector. Both professions with much higher odds of ending in a surprise stabbing. Your biggest worries, swarms thieves, and whether you skimmed enough honey for yourself before the imperial inspector shows up. Speaking of which, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull on a tunic that's seen better decades and step into the courtyard. The bees are already at work, their wings glinting in the weak light as they dart between your hive's stacked clay cylinders that look suspiciously like overturned flower pots. Historians still argue whether Byzantine beekeepers actually understood pollination, but they did believe bees were tiny messengers of God, which explains why no one dares swat them. A quirky tidbit. Your neighbor, a grumpy Armenian baker, leaves a loaf of yesterday's bread on your doorstep every morning, not out of kindness. Oh no. He needs your beeswax to seal his next batch, and he's terrible at asking nicely. You take the bread anyway. It's slightly stale, but when drizzled with honey, the mediocre stuff you hide from tax collectors, it's almost luxurious. As you chew, a ship's horn echoes from the harbor. Somewhere out there, traders are unloading spices from India, silk from China. And all you have to do today is tend to some bugs and maybe nap in the shade. Not bad for a Tuesday in 532 AD. The morning chill still lingers as you kneel beside your hives, running calloused fingers over the sun-warmed clay. These aren't the neat wooden boxes of modern beekeeping. No, your hives are ancient, bulbous things, their surfaces pocked from years of weather and wax. You lift the lid of the first one with practiced ease, the scent of honey and propolis rising like a sleepy sigh. The bees stir, but don't swarm. They know you tolerate you. A few land on your arms, their tiny feet tickling your skin as they investigate this giant, clumsy creature who brings them water on hot days. Your tools are simple: a curved knife for cutting comb, a smoldering bundle of lavender and oak leaves to calm the bees, and a clay pot to hold the harvest. No protective gear. Of course, Byzantine beekeepers consider veils and gloves the mark of a coward. Historians still argue whether this was bravery or stupidity, but you've only been stung 11 times this month, so clearly you're doing something right. As you work, you notice one hive is quieter than the others. Peering inside, you spot the problem: the queen has vanished, leaving behind confused workers and half-finished honeycomb. Here's where Byzantine ingenuity kicks in. You reach for your secret weapon, a small wooden box containing a spare queen you bartered from a beekeeper near Thessalonica last spring. Gently, you introduce her to the hive, murmuring a prayer to St. Modamnoch, the patron saint of beekeepers. Yes, that's his real name. No one knows how to pronounce it correctly. A mainstream fact, Byzantine honey was famous across the Mediterranean, prized for its light floral taste. But here's the quirky bit: your bees are feeding mostly on linden trees, which grow near the city's aqueducts. That means your honey has a faint minty undertone, thanks to the herbs that always find a way to grow where they shouldn't. Some customers swear it cures indigestion. You don't correct them. By mid-morning, your back aches, your hands are sticky, and 3 bees have somehow gotten tangled in your beard. But the hives are thriving. The new queen is accepted, and the first golden drips of today's harvest are pooling in your clay pot. You take a moment to sit in the dappled shade of a fig tree, watching a line of ants discover a drop of spilled honey. They'll tell their friends, of course. By sundown, you'll have an ant problem. But for now, there's just the breeze, the buzzing, and the distant sound of monks chanting in Hagia Sophia. The rhythmic scraping of your knife against honeycomb fills the quiet morning air as you carefully harvest the season's first golden yield. A bead of sweat trickles down your temple, not from exertion, but from the slow-building warmth of the Mediterranean sun climbing over Constantinople's walls. Your fingers move methodically, tracing the hexagonal patterns perfected by generations of bees before you. There's something sacred in this repetition, a ritual unchanged since Virgil wrote about beekeeping in his Georgics. As you work, your neighbor's son, a gangly youth of about 14, peers over the courtyard wall with undisguised curiosity. Is it true, he asks, that bees are born from dead oxen? You nearly drop your honey pot. This, it seems, is what passes for education in 6th century Constantinople. With the patience of someone who's explained this 17 times already this month, you describe how bees actually come from other bees. The boy looks disappointed. His teacher, a monk at the local monastery, had been quite insistent about the oxen thing. Here's a mainstream fact that might surprise you. Byzantine beekeepers were among the first to practice selective breeding, though they didn't call it that. You've been carefully nurturing your stock for years, favoring colonies that produce more wax and less aggression. The results speak for themselves. Your hives yield nearly twice as much as those of your cousin in Antioch, though you'd never brag about it out loud. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you notice a particularly dark patch of honeycomb. These are your holy bees, the ones that feed primarily on the flowering herbs in the monastery garden. The monks claim this honey has miraculous properties, and while you're skeptical, you've noticed it does seem to fetch a higher price at market, especially when sold near religious holidays. Historians still argue whether Byzantine beekeepers understood the full economic value of their trade. As you seal a fresh batch of honey in clay amphorae stamped with your personal mark, a crude drawing of a bee that looks suspiciously like a lopsided chicken, you can't help but chuckle at the debate. The imperial tax collectors certainly understand the value. They take their cut in honey wax and occasionally when you're running low in thinly veiled threats. The morning's work concludes with your daily ritual, running a finger along the edge of a broken comb and savoring the season's first taste. The flavor bursts across your tongue, floral bright with a faint herbal note from the city's wild thyme. In this moment, with the sun warm on your back and the contented hum of bees in your ears, you can almost understand why the monks consider this work holy. The clanging of the midday bell echoes across Constantinople's rooftops, just as you finish straining the last of the morning's honey through a linen cloth. Your stomach growls in agreement, time to visit the baker, though you know exactly how this exchange will go. As you step into the narrow alleyway, the scent of charred bread and sesame oil wraps around you like an old friend. The baker, a burly Syrian named Leo, with flour permanently dusted in his eyebrows, eyes your approach with theatrical suspicion. Ah, the honey thief returns. He booms, wiping his hands on an apron that might once have been white. You wordlessly produce a small clay pot of wax, not your finest quality, but enough to seal at least 20 loaves. His eyes gleam with poorly concealed greed. Here's how Byzantine bread economics work. Leo needs your wax to waterproof his bread sacks for the market, and you need his slightly burnt rejects because they're perfect for soaking up honey. What follows is a dance as ritualized as any imperial ceremony. He'll complain the wax is too soft. You'll mention seeing a Persian merchant offering better quality. He'll throw in an extra loaf out of pity for your terrible bargaining skills. Today, however, Leo has a new tactic. Heard the imperial inspectors were at the docks yesterday, he remarks casually, examining his fingernails. Testing honey purity with some new method involving lead rods. You freeze mid-reach for a sesame roll. This is either a bluff or vital intelligence. Historians still argue whether Byzantine food inspectors were genuinely thorough or just inventing reasons to demand bribes. A quirky tidbit surfaces as Leo leans closer. Old Demetrios swears they're only targeting honey mixed with fig syrup this year. He whispers before straightening up and loudly declaring your wax barely adequate while sliding 4 loaves across the counter instead of the usual 3. You take the victory and the bread. As you wander back through the market, nibbling a crust still warm from the oven, a mainstream fact comes to mind. Byzantine bakers produced over 80 types of bread, from simple barley loaves to extravagant creations studded with nuts and dried fruit. Your humble sesame rolls are the equivalent of gas station snacks compared to the honey-glazed brioche served in the Great Palace. The sun beats down as you pass a wine merchant, haggling with a cluster of monks. One of them eyes your honey pot with a calculating gaze that suggests he's about to invent a new miracle cure. You quicken your pace. Somewhere in the city, imperial inspectors are prowling your bees, need checking, and there's a shady spot in your courtyard with your name on it. The imperial tax collector arrives just as you're settling into your afternoon nap beneath the olive tree. His shadow falls across your face, first long and ominous like a thundercloud over the Bosphorus. You recognize the purple stripe on his tunic before you even open your eyes. Ah, you mutter, rubbing sleep from your eyes, the human embodiment of a bad harvest. The collector, a gaunt man named Theodore, who smells faintly of vinegar and disappointment, unrolls a parchment with theatrical flourish. By order of Emperor Justinian, he intones 1/3 measure of pure honey, 2 pounds of beeswax, and his finger trails down the document. Ah, yes, 1 jar of that special mint-infused batch for the Augusta's personal use. You groan louder than necessary. The Augusta's special batch is of course code for Theodore's own sweet tooth. Last year you caught him dipping figs directly into your storage amphora. But protesting is pointless. The Byzantine tax system operates on a simple principle. Pay what they ask, or suddenly find your hives accidentally crushed by a runaway ox cart. Here's a mainstream fact that stings worse than your bees. honey taxes funded Constantinople's massive building projects, including Hagia Sophia's dazzling mosaics. As you ladle out your hard-earned harvest, you like to imagine your honey sweetening some bishop's tea as he admires golden ceiling tiles. The quirky tidbit, Theodore carries a small lead weight to verify your honey isn't diluted. What he doesn't know is that you've carved a hollow in your measuring scoop. It's not cheating, it's creative accounting. Historians still argue whether Byzantine tax evasion was a crime or an Olympic sport. As Theodore departs with his loot, your neighbor's wife appears with a basket of early cherries. "For the children," she says, eyeing your depleted stores. You trade half a jar of second-quality honey and watch her walk away, already planning how to explain the missing tax honey to your bees. The afternoon sun slants through your courtyard as you settle onto a wobbly, three-legged stool, the promised cherries glistening in a clay bowl beside you. You've earned this moment the taxes are paid. Mostly, the hives are thriving, mostly. And the baker's slightly charred bread makes the perfect vehicle for what you're about to do next. With ceremonial solemnity, you drizzle your finest honey over everything, until the bowl looks like a miniature golden swamp. As you take the first bite, the flavors explode. Tart, cherry flesh giving way to honey's floral sweetness, all anchored by the smoky crunch of bread crust. This, you decide, is why civilization exists. Byzantine breakfasts were simple but ingenious affairs. Bread, honey, and whatever fruit was in season, washed down with watered wine if you were fancy or goat's milk if you weren't. A mainstream fact floats through your sticky fingers. The Byzantines believed honey could cure everything from sore throats to melancholy. Modern science would later prove them at least half right raw. Honey does have antibacterial properties, though it probably won't fix your divorce. The quirky tidbit comes when you notice a line of ants marching toward your feast. Rather than shoo them away, you flick a crumb onto the ground for them. This isn't kindness, it's strategy. Your grandfather taught you that well-fed ants are less likely to climb into your hives. Of course, he also believed swallowing live bees cured arthritis. So take that wisdom with a grain of salt. As you lick honey from your fingers, your gaze drifts to the harbor below. A new ship from Alexandria is docking its sails, billowing like giant linen napkins. Somewhere in its hold are dates, almonds, and possibly even cinnamon. All things that would pair magnificently with your honey. The thought sparks a dangerous idea involving tomorrow's market and some creative bargaining. Historians still argue whether Byzantine merchants were more motivated by profit or the sheer joy of haggling. You're pretty sure it's both as you mentally calculate how many jars it might take to get your hands on just a small pouch of those expensive spices. The bees hum approvingly from their hives. They know their work is about to become significantly more luxurious. The distant cry of gulls mixes with the murmur of the marketplace as you weave through the crowded stalls. Your precious honey jars carefully cradled in a basket lined with straw. You catch snippets of conversation. A spice merchant arguing with a nun over pepper prices, two sailors comparing blisters, and somewhere someone playing a badly tuned lyre. The air hangs thick with the scent of fish incense and the ever-present hint of honey from your own cargo. You're nearly to your usual spot when a hand clamps onto your shoulder. It's old Nicholas, the parchment maker, his fingers permanently stained purple from shellfish dye. Heard about the bee spies, he whispers, breath reeking of yesterday's garlic. Before you can respond, he's dragged you behind a stack of amphorae and launched into a conspiratorial rant about how Emperor Justinian's agents are recruiting beekeepers to monitor the docks. Here's the mainstream fact: the Byzantines did maintain an extensive intelligence network. But the idea that they'd use beekeepers as spies, that's where Nicolaus loses you until he points out how perfectly your hive's locations overlook the harbor. How no one questions beekeepers moving about at odd hours. How your smoke pots could double as signal devices. You laugh it off, but the seed is planted. As you set up your stall, you notice two men in military cloaks lingering near the spice merchant. Are they watching you? Or just haggling for saffron? The quirky tidbit, Byzantine paranoia, was so rampant that there's actual historical debate about whether bee spies were real or just an urban legend. Your first customer, a wealthy matron who complains your honey is too floral while buying 3 jars, distracts you from spycraft. By midday, you've traded honey for a small pouch of cinnamon. Take that Alexandrian ship a copper spoon, and information about which market inspectors are taking bribes this week. As you pack up, one of the cloaked men approaches. Your heart pounds until he asks about buying wax for sealing documents. The transaction is ordinary, but his parting words linger. The Empire always remembers loyal citizens. Was that a threat? A promise. Or just small talk from someone bad at small talk? Historians still argue whether Byzantine intelligence reports included honey quality assessments. You decide to gift your next imperial tax jar with extra mint just in case. The marketplace clamor fades behind you as you trudge uphill toward home, your basket lighter, but your pockets satisfyingly heavier with copper follies coins. The cinnamon pouch tucked in your belt gives off occasional whiffs of exotic warmth that make your nose twitch a far cry from the usual smells of donkey dung and fish sauce that permeate Constantinople's streets. You're nearly at your door when the heat finally wins. The sun has baked the city stones all day, and now they radiate warmth like a giant griddle. Your tunic sticks to your back, and even the bees seem lethargic, their usual frenetic buzzing slowed to a drowsy hum. The olive tree in your courtyard casts a perfect circle of shade, its silver-green leaves, whispering promises of cool respite. Without ceremony, you collapse onto the packed earth beneath it, your back against the rough bark. A mainstream fact floats through your sweat-damp thoughts: the Byzantines practically invented the siesta. Smart people, people who understood that noon in summer was for resting, not laboring. Somewhere in the great palace, even the emperor is probably napping right now. The quirky tidbit comes when you notice your neighbor's cat, a scrawny marmalade beast with one torn ear, sneaking toward your hives. You're too tired to intervene, but the bees handle it themselves. One well-aimed sting to the nose sends the cat fleeing with a yowl. The hive's defenders return to work without fanfare. You make a mental note to leave some honey out for the cat later, not out of guilt, but because it keeps the mice away. As your eyelids grow heavy, you catch snippets of city life a water seller's call. Children playing in the next courtyard, the rhythmic scrape of a spoon against a pot as someone prepares the evening meal. Historians still argue whether daily life in Constantinople was more stressful or relaxed than modern cities. Lying here, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight, you'd vote for relaxed. A bee lands on your knee, its wings shimmering. You watch it clean its antennae with fastidious legs before flying off toward the hives. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you know you should check the new queen's progress or prepare more wax pots. But the olive tree's shade is too perfect, the earth beneath you too comfortably warm. The tasks can wait until the sun dips lower. just a few more minutes. A shadow falls across your face, not the pleasant dappled shade of the olive tree, but something taller and more impatient. You blink awake to find a wiry man in a travel-stained robe standing over you, his walking staff planted firmly in the dirt. The scent of crushed mint and something distinctly medicinal clings to him. Ah, you groan, rubbing sleep from your eyes. The wandering monk returns. Brother Theodolos, part healer, part herbalist, and full-time nuisance, grins down at you, revealing a noticeable gap where his left canine should be. "They told me you'd be napping," he says, nudging your foot with his staff. The city's most industrious beekeeper sleeping while his bees work. You sit up, stretching stiff muscles. The sun has moved significantly since you dozed off. The monk makes himself at home beside you, unpacking a leather satchel filled with small clay pots and dried herbs. "Got something for your joint pain," he announces, producing a jar of suspiciously green salve, made from willow bark comfrey and just a hint of opium poppy. He winks. For the pain, of course. Here's a mainstream fact. Byzantine medicine blended ancient Greek knowledge with Christian mysticism and a healthy dose of trial and error. Brother Theodolos represents all three approaches at once. He'll quote Hippocrates while blessing a poultice, then admit he's not entirely sure what's in it. The quirky tidbit comes when he examines your latest honey batch, holding a jar up to the light like a jeweler appraising a gem. "Your bees have been feeding near the monastery again," he observes. "I can smell the saint's beard in this one." Saint's beard being local slang for the purple-flowered hyssop that grows around religious sites. Your bargaining session is brief: 3 jars of honey for his salve, 2 wax cakes for his church candles, and 1 promise not to tell the tax collector about your hidden mint honey stash. As he departs, trailing herbs and eccentricity, you notice he's left behind a sprig of something fragrant near your hives. Historians still argue whether Byzantine herbal remedies actually worked or just made patients feel cared for. You rub some salve on your aching wrist and decide it doesn't matter either way. The cooling sensation is pleasant, and the bees seem to approve of the new herb's scent. The monk's salve still tingles on your wrist when a sudden change in the bee's hum prickles the back of your neck. You look up to see a dark, seething cloud boiling out from your newest hive, a swirling mass of furious wings and stingers. The air itself seems to vibrate with their displeasure. "Ah," you mutter, "right on schedule. Swarm season. Every beekeeper knows it's coming, yet it always arrives like an unexpected tax audit." The bees aren't angry exactly, just profoundly dissatisfied with their current living situation. Maybe the hive is too crowded. Maybe they don't like the new queen's leadership style. Or maybe, like half of Constantinople's population, they're just in a bad mood because of the summer heat. You move deliberately, reaching for your smoker, a perforated clay pot filled with smoldering lavender stalks. The sweet, herb-scented smoke curls upward as you approach the swirling mass. Here's a mainstream fact. Byzantine beekeepers were among the first to use smoke for swarm calming, though they attributed its effectiveness to pacifying the bees' humors, rather than masking alarm pheromones. As you gently direct the smoke toward the agitated insects, you begin to sing an old Thracian lullaby. Your grandmother taught you its rhythm, matching the slow circles you make with the smoker. The quirky tidbit. Certain Byzantine beekeepers believed swarms could be soothed by specific musical modes. You're pretty sure it's nonsense, but the song seems to help you stay calm, which probably helps the bees too. The swarm begins to settle on a low olive branch, forming a living beard of buzzing workers. You carefully position a new hive beneath them, its interior rubbed with lemongrass oil to make it smell inviting. Historians still argue whether Byzantine beekeepers actually understood swarm behavior or just followed traditions that happened to work. By sunset, the crisis has passed. Most of the bees have accepted their new home, though a few stubborn holdouts cling to the branch. You leave them there sometimes. Even bees need time to adjust. As you wash sticky propolis from your hands, the evening call to prayer echoes across the city. Another day survived. Another swarm prevented from relocating to your neighbor's laundry. The golden light of late afternoon gilds Constantinople's rooftops as you lug your remaining honey jars toward the agora's western edge, where Persian merchants cluster like grapes on a vine. Their stalls overflow with spices, silks, and the occasional caged peacock, all luxuries that make your humble honey seem downright provincial. You spot Rostam immediately, his burgundy turban bobbing above the crowd as he haggles with a nun over saffron prices. The Persian merchant turns as you approach his oiled beard, glistening in the sunlight. Ah, the beekeeper with the thin honey returns. He booms, arms spread in theatrical welcome. Here's how this dance goes. Rostam will insult your product. You'll feign offense, and somehow you'll both walk away satisfied. Today, he sniffs your honey jar like a wine connoisseur, then declares it adequate for sweetening camel milk, perhaps. You counter by pointing out his own wares, that rare cinnamon looks suspiciously like cassia bark. A mainstream fact slips into the banter. Byzantine-Persian trade relations were famously volatile. But honey was one commodity that always flowed between empires. Even during wars, merchants like Rostam obtained safe passage. Everyone wanted those floral notes from the Marmara coast. The quirky tidbit emerges when Rostam produces his secret weapon, a clay cup and small honey dipper. He insists on tasting before bargaining, a ritual you've come to appreciate. As he samples your latest batch, his eyebrows lift slightly. You've hidden mint in this one, he accuses, licking the dipper clean. The haggling intensifies. Rostam offers 2 measures of cinnamon for 6 jars. You demand 3 measures, plus that decorative brass spoon he's been using to stir tea. Historians still argue whether Byzantine-Persian trade was more about commerce or performance art. When the deal is finally struck, 3 jars for 2 measures of cinnamon and the spoon, Rostam leans in conspiratorially. A word of advice, he murmurs. The Egyptian ships brought news of a honey blight in Antioch. Prices will triple by autumn. You thank him with an extra spoonful of honey straight from the jar. As you walk away, cinnamon warming your belt pouch, you realize Rostam never actually said your honey was thin today. High praise indeed. Steam curls through the dimly lit bathhouse as you ease into the warm water, your muscles sighing in relief after the long market day. The public baths are Constantinople's great equalizer. Here, senators and street vendors alike lounge side by side, their differences literally washed away. You settle onto a submerged marble seat, letting the heat work its magic on your beekeeping weary shoulders. Nearby, 2 merchants debate in hushed tones about the latest troop movements near Antioch. 30,000 Persian cavalry, one insists, his soapy belly bobbing in the water. Nonsense, counters the other, a spice trader you recognize from the docks. Just Justinian moving tax collectors to richer pastures. Here's a mainstream fact. Byzantines considered baths essential for health, though modern historians still argue whether they were more about hygiene or gossip. As you scrub your arms with strigil and oil, you catch snippets of conversation that paint a picture of an empire perpetually on the brink of crisis, yet somehow always continuing. The quirky tidbit floats to you when the bath attendant, a wiry Egyptian with tattooed arms, offers your choice of scented oils. You select lavender, not for the fragrance, but because you've noticed bees seem calmer around its scent. The attendant nods approvingly. Wise. Rose attracts lovers, but lavender. He taps his nose knowingly attracts business. As you move to the cooler pool, an elderly senator holds the court in the corner, holding forth on the decline of modern honey quality. In my youth, he declares honey had body character. Not like this thin swill they sell near the docks. You resist the urge to mention your own hives better to let sleeping senators lie. The baths empty as evening approaches, the water growing still. You're the last to leave lingering until the attendant begins sweeping. Stepping into the cooling air, you realize the bees won't care about Persian cavalry or senatorial honey preferences. Your hives will keep producing the same golden sweetness whether empires rise or fall. The flickering oil lamp casts dancing shadows across your workbench as you press warmed beeswax between wooden molds. Candle making is evening work, methodical quiet, and profitable enough to justify the aching fingers. Each press releases the honeyed scent of summers, past the wax still holding faint floral notes from long-digested nectar. Your rhythm is interrupted by a faint scraping at the courtyard gate. Not the usual cat or drunk neighbor, but something more purposeful. You freeze a half-formed candle dangling from your hands. The sound comes again, metal on wood, followed by a muffled curse. Here's how Byzantine home security works. You grab the nearest heavy object, in this case, a clay honeypot, and creep toward the noise. The gate creaks open just as you raise your improvised weapon, revealing your neighbor's youngest son, Theo. His arms already raised in surrender. Don't hit me, I just wanted... His gaze darts to the cooling wax cakes. A mainstream fact surfaces through your adrenaline. Wax theft was punishable by flogging in Justinian's code, though most beekeepers settled matters privately. You lower the pot, studying the boy's hollow cheeks. This isn't greed, it's hunger. The quirky tidbit, Theo isn't after the wax itself, but the honey-bred crude cakes of wax and residual honey that poor families would boil for scant calories. You've caught 3 thieves this year, all neighborhood kids. Sit, you grunt, pointing to the workbench. Theo obeys eyes wide as you break a wax cake in half. The good stuff goes back in the mold. The scraps, crumbly bits with visible honey pockets, you push toward him. Eat it here. Don't let the magistrate's men see. Historians still argue whether Byzantine poverty was better or worse than modern hunger. Watching Theo devour the wax with single-minded intensity, you're not sure the debate matters. As he leaves, you slip an actual honey cake into his pocket. The bees won't miss it. The last candle is molded and set to cool as midnight's stillness settles over Constantinople. Even the ever-present harbor sounds have faded to occasional creaks of moored ships. You should sleep tomorrow brings another pre-dawn start, but instead you find yourself wandering to your hives, drawn by some unnameable urge. Moonlight transforms your courtyard into a study in silver and shadow. The clay hives look like ancient ruins, their surfaces etched with generations of wax drippings and weather marks. You kneel beside them, pressing your ear to the warm clay. Inside, the colony's collective breath whispers 1,000 tiny wings fanning legs, shuffling jaws working wax. It's the sound of a miniature city as busy as Constantinople itself. Here's a mainstream fact that suddenly feels profound. A single Byzantine beehive could house up to 50,000 bees, each performing specialized tasks with clockwork precision. Guards station themselves at the entrance, nurses tend the brood, and foragers, those adventurous souls, range miles in search of blossoms. All without maps, meetings, or tax collectors demanding a cut. The quirky tidbit comes when you notice a lone worker returning late, her pollen baskets packed with some night-blooming flowers offering. She circles your head once before disappearing into the hive, as if delivering a message. Maybe she is. Byzantine folklore claimed bees carried whispers from angels, though you suspect that's just what beekeepers told themselves when they talked to insects. As you rise, a breeze carries the scent of lemon blossoms from a nearby garden. Historians still argue whether Byzantine urban planning intentionally included so many flowering trees, or if it was happy accident. Standing there between sleeping hives and sleeping city, you don't much care about the why. The bees have what they need. You have what you need. For now, that's enough. Dawn is still hours away when you finally settle onto your sleeping mat, your body heavy with the day's labors, but your mind strangely light. The night air carries the last coolness it will offer before the sun reclaims the city, and you pull a thin linen sheet up to your chin. Somewhere beyond your courtyard walls, a drunk sings off-key about lost love. Closer by, the bee's hum has settled into its nighttime rhythm, softer now, like the city itself is exhaling. You close your eyes and picture next season's hives. There's that empty spot near the lavender bush where a new colony might thrive. Maybe you'll try stacking the clay cylinders differently this time. Old Georgios swears his diagonal arrangement produces sweeter honey. Or perhaps you'll finally build those wooden frames the Cappadocian beekeeper described, though the bees might revolt against such modern nonsense. A mainstream fact drifts through your drowsy thoughts. Byzantine beekeeping methods remained largely unchanged for nearly 1,000 years. There's comfort in that continuity. The same sun warming the same clay hives season after season, empire after empire. The quirky tidbit surfaces as you hover between waking and dreaming. They say Emperor Augustus's beekeeper could predict storms based on how the bees behaved. You've never noticed any weather-predicting talent in your colonies, though they do get irritable when the baker burns his bread. Historians will keep arguing about the Byzantine Empire's legacy, its laws, its wars, its endless theological debates. But here, in the dark, with the scent of honey still clinging to your hands, and the bees' quiet symphony, just audible through your closed eyelids, none of that seems to matter much. The drunk's song fades. The night insects take up their chorus. Somewhere beyond the city walls, wildflowers wait for dawn and for wings. And so we leave you there on the edge of sleep with the bees keeping watch and the city dreaming around you. The worries of tomorrow, the taxes, the swarms, the endless bargaining can all wait. For now, there's just this moment. The cool linen against your skin, the distant lap of waves against the seawall. The knowledge that when the sun returns, your hives will be waiting. Constantinople endures as it always has. The fishermen will rise before dawn. The bakers will fire their ovens, and the merchants will spin their tales of faraway lands. Your bees, those tiny alchemists, will turn morning dew and flower kisses into liquid gold, as they've done since before emperors ruled from this city. Let your breathing slow to match their rhythm. Let the night's stillness wrap around you like honey in a jar. The day's stickiness is washed away. The wax is molded, the honey safely stored. There are no more tasks tonight, only rest, and the quiet certainty that when you wake, the world will still turn. The bees will still hum, and the olive tree will still offer its shade. Sleep comes gently, like a worker bee returning to the hive at dusk. The last thing you remember is the scent of lavender from the baths, the warmth of the cinnamon in your belt pouch, and the faintest taste of honey lingering on your lips. Outside, the stars watch over 1,000 rooftops, 1,000 stories, and a dozen clay hives where even now the bees keep their nocturnal vigil.